This lady you don't want to miss. Join us on Bloody Mavericks where sanity takes a back seat. Episode 2 is live. Laurel Lautensack, marketing guru and director of marketing of one and only Black Swan Group. You will learn how to embrace the failure, the secret behind McDonald's golden arches. How about tactical empathy? And much, much more. And I welcome you to Bloody Maverick Show. Hi, I'm Matt Mack and this is Bloody Mavericks. We've got a special guest today, Laurel Lautensack. She is the marketing guru, the director of marketing in Black Swan Group, which is pretty famous organization based on the world famous book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And Lauren is the person who is running the whole show and making you guys know who they are actually. She is a great person with amazing stories, both on her personal side, but also even further down the background line, including parents, grandparents, and a big part of it being German descent. In majority on one side, a little bit of Irish, a little bit of English on the other side. Am I correct?
Yep.
Welcome, Lauren.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure, and thank you for coming such a long way from US, from Columbus, Ohio.
Yes.
Thank you. It was a long drive, wasn't it?
Yes. Good drive though.
Okay. Why was it good? Just
I didn't get any speeding tickets.
yeah, that's definitely a plus, 100%. Okay. I wanted to start with just running with some basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because of your German descent, I brought some German, like let's say spécialité de la maison, so things that I think there are really German, which first of all for me we've got the white wine, which is a wine with Maria, the Holy Mary on it. I think if I'm spelling it correctly, it's Liebfrau Mich, which is the wine actually that we know from Poland, from back home, which was one of the wines that is and was really famous, white wines. Mm-hmm. Besides Riesling, obviously, but we also have salami, and that, to be honest with you, that was the way I was introduced to salami. It was through German salami.
Interesting. Yeah.
And this is the German one, made in Canada, because that's I guess the most efficient way for storing and making food fresh, right?
Right.
But yeah, for us to test it out, do you want to
Sure.
taste it?
Let's try it out.
Okay. Okay. And there are two different types of salami. They are the same type, different brands, so they will taste a little bit different. If you want to try.
Sure.
No? Okay. It's really sweet. I forgot how sweet it is actually.
It's clean though.
It is.
It's very clean.
And I think that's the part of German perfectionism. It's always the same. It's like they made it to the certain level and it's gonna stay there constantly. The quality always gonna be the same. So, like, I think that's one of the German things on my, like, part of my family is German as well. So
yeah,
that always been a big thing.
Yeah, it is sweet, but it's very clean, which is nice. Yeah.
So let's start with couple easy ones for a warm up.
Okay.
Lauren, can you tell me the book that you read most recently that you liked a lot, or you learned from it, or
Now I have a question for you.
Mm.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Whatever you want to share. I'm good with all.
So the most recent book I read was called Four Winds, and it is a fiction history book, and it was about the Great Dust Bowl in America, which is right at the time of the Depression. And I remember growing up in school learning about the Depression, but I don't remember anything about the Dust Bowl.
What is the Dust Bowl?
So basically it's this time in the Depression when there was no rain for like a period of 3 years. So out west, all the crops died. And they actually had this coined saying like the Okies, because everyone from like Texas, Oklahoma moved to, and it didn't make a difference where they were from, they just called them the Okies, moved to California to work the farm fields over there because they couldn't survive in their lands. And I had no idea. I felt like very ignorant because I was like, what? I don't remember any of this in history.
It sounds pretty interesting.
It was pretty interesting.
And like if the Great Depression wasn't enough, they got the no rain for 3 years, crops dying, probably people dying as well in the same time because of that. And
people like that were moving around became very very impoverished, and they were treated like very poorly in California, and they referred to them as the Okies even though they were Americans. So it was very eye-opening and interesting because I definitely did not remember that from history class if we talked about it.
That's the peculiar thing about school and history classes, that like if you just move a little bit, it can be a state or it can be a small country like European countries, which are equivalent basically of states in US, that the history changed just a couple of kilometers one way or another. It's going to be a different story about the same thing. Yeah,
totally. Absolutely.
Wow. That's okay. That's a nice I would say we can have a nice segue back to your background, if you're fine with us starting there. So, can you tell me what do you mean? What do you think, or what comes to your mind when you think background? What is it for you?
I think it's a combination of things. One, it's your heritage. It's also where you grow up, and what you learn. So Chris has this saying that people are actually more in common with where they reside growing up than their actual heritage. For example, if you grew up in New York City and you always went to the same bodega, you might cross paths with someone that has a totally different nationality, but you have that common ground of stomping grounds. And so you have that natural like connection with them. Even though you might not have the same heritage of where your history comes from. So it's kind of an interesting combination, I think, of the two. Obviously, like your heritage plays a huge impact, but also like where you grew up, what you were around, what you were exposed to, all those different factors play into it as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of things actually that can have a influence on who we are and who we become. Based on both, as you mentioned, us growing up, but also in the in the mature years as well, right? So
absolutely.
I think it's a little bit different that when you are already a thinking and mature human being, you look at the background and your heritage in a different way than you would as a kid, right?
Sure.
It's like, for instance, I remember the best from my experience going with my parents around churches in different countries. I wasn't really giving too much crap about that. It was nice to see it, but at the end of the day, how many churches or how many museums you can visit, right? But now the older I get, the more I wanna understand and see and visit, right? Yeah,
and it's interesting because as a child, you only know what you're exposed to, and as an adult, you get to choose your exposure to things. So it's a different perspective you have on that.
That's right. So from your perspective, what if you could choose, what you would be exposing yourself more to?
Well, I think my parents did a pretty phenomenal job because they exposed me to so many different things. And as a result, as being a mom, I want to expose my daughter to as many of those things as well. So I just think people get uncomfortable with change and things they're not familiar with. And the more times you expose yourself to different things and put yourself in different scenarios, the more comfortable you are with being uncomfortable, which is like amazing then, because then it's the world's yours.
It's basically going outside of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. 100%. So yeah.
That's how you grow and that's how you learn the most, right?
Definitely.
So let's dive into your background.
Okay.
What do you think made you who you are and your background? What is important to you? What was important to your parents that they tried to transfer toward it?
Sure.
Your upbringing?
I would say my parents definitely had a huge impact. I have a very good relationship with my parents, which I think helps tremendously. They were parents first, and then as we became adults, right, they became friends, which is unique and special. Yeah. And so just the way they thought and set us up for success was huge. So, yeah.
In what way was it huge? What way was it influential? Because you said that they were parents first and then they became friends. But what specifically, from your perspective, was so influential in that?
So my parents, I feel like I grew up in a very unique way. So my parents were very, very much about like education. And to give you a background, my mom is science and my dad is science and math. And my dad is probably the smartest dumb human you'll ever meet in your life. And my mom is the smartest and kind human you'll meet in your life. And we would be asked questions about like, how did you use the scientific method to solve your problems? So it just transforms the way you are thinking. One of the things that they asked us almost every single day was like, okay, what did you learn at school? Great. Now, how did you fail at school? And how did that failure affect your decision-making process to become better tomorrow? Which is very odd, like question what you're thinking. But like, I think it changed the way that we thought. Like we didn't view failure as a bad thing. We viewed failure as by a result, like a way of figuring out something not to do so that we could do it better tomorrow or have a better result tomorrow or get closer to our end goal. My parents just like instilled this environment of creativity. So like we were allowed to do as many creative, dumb, stupid things as long as they were there and they were able to monitor it. And like they would much rather have us fail there and have a support system than go out into the world as young adults and fail and not know how to react or like shut down. So they set us up for failure so that we could, by failing, succeed. So it was just like a different way of thinking. And I know that was not normal. And I didn't realize that wasn't like what normal parents did until later on. So. It's
so amazing to hear that your parents had that insight of putting you guys through, because it's you and your siblings. How many siblings you have?
So I have one brother, and then I have two younger sisters, and I'm the oldest. So that definitely played a factor too. Yeah,
that's right. So it is really interesting because besides going out of your comfort zone, that where you think about it, it's with going to where your fear is and failing in things, in variety of things, gonna make you better doing it next time, right?
Yeah, and it didn't have to be like a certain area that we failed at. Like we failed at everything. We failed at sports. We failed at school. We failed at creating businesses. We failed at everything, and that was like encouraged because we were trying something.
That's right.
So, yeah.
It's like your parents gave you a trampoline towards adulthood, basically by learning that failing is not bad.
Right.
And you learn tremendously just going at it, right?
Yeah.
And picking yourself up after falling and going again
Absolutely.
And again.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that was super interesting was we also indirectly learned that when we fail, we still had people around us to support us. So like, if we failed, like say I went all in on a business now, I know that if I lost everything, I would still have my family there to support me. And so it would be okay if I failed. Like it was just a unique thing to do.
It is. It's where do you think it came from for your parents? Because that's like, as you say, it's a special way of thinking about it. Because if you just compare it to anyone else, like nowadays parents are protecting their children for like basically keeping them in a cocoon. Sure. And like don't touch the hot, don't get electrocuted, and like these are extreme examples, but in the same time, if you don't fall off a tree, you will not learn not to go on it to certain heights or whatever else. That like if you are raised in an environment which is constantly safe, constantly protected, and kind of sterile, I would say, how can you be aware of the world, which is pretty rough if you look at it, right?
Yeah. So I think that it honestly came from their parents. For example, my mom's dad owned a pharmacy, and that was like, to own your own business during the 50s was a unique thing. And his grandpa had come over on a boat, worked his way over on a boat, playing the violin. I mean, like, that's what he did. And then just came here and just worked really hard and failed until he didn't fail anymore and got success. So like, it's just a numbers game is what it is. Like, the more times you fail, the greater odds of success. And same with my dad's side. My dad's dad was a nuclear chemist and had so many patents on carbon that it was literally because he failed. He failed so many different times that he patented the way he failed, so that when he figured out how to make carbon, like, he was successful. So I think it was just instilled in them. And then it was crazy that my parents met and both kind of had the same like background in some ways, and then we're able to like instill that even further in us and just really lean into that. And as growing, it was, I don't know, different but amazing.
It is. And the funny when you say about this being patenting the failing, it's the first thing that comes to my mind is Edison and his 1,000 trials of the light bulb, right?
Absolutely.
It's exactly the same approach towards achievement. Like, I haven't failed 999 times. I found 999 ways that didn't work.
Yeah, and I think that really goes down to like my parents and the scientific method, right? Like, the scientific method is you gather data, you make a guess, you test that data, and then you gather the results. And if it works, you test it again. If it doesn't work, you don't test it, and you continue to go around. And so both of my parents coming from this, and their family coming from the medical, mathematical, science worlds, it was kind of instilled in them, and then it just continued to go down through generations like that. So
how is it being born into a, like, in one hand, I want to ask, because your parents are really scientific, both of them, and but in the same time, I wanted to ask, how is it being the creative one? Because marketing is a creative venture, and you need to figure things on your own. But then I basically answered my own question while you were saying about you guys trying constantly and going after it and doing the creative things.
So like, perfect example, we were testing this thing on LinkedIn for marketing, right? And it wasn't working. It's not getting the results. Okay, so what do? Continue to do the same thing? No, you stop it. Go look at what results were achievable, what you liked about it, and then retest it again until you get a better result. So even though it's in a creative field now, like I'm testing graphics and copy and content, it's still the same method of failure. And then how you like take that failure and change it and retry. So it's kind of the same thing.
Okay. And what's your benchmark for failure? Like when do you say enough is enough? And
I don't think you can ever say enough is enough. And I think that's still true even of my parents today, because like when you say like, oh, I've had enough failure, you've basically given up and you're not growing. And then if you're not growing, you're dying. You know, you're not, you know, age is like your body ages, but if you don't live, you can die at 10 and like be as old as a 90-year-old that has lived.
Totally
or the vice versa, right? Like it's all about like what did you do with your life and what did you live. So like if you continue and you're 90, like my grandma, this is wild to me. Okay, she is 94 years old and she is in a billiard league because she wanted to learn how to play billiards in her 90s. And now she plays in tournaments. But like what 90, like, yeah. And she's also learned to play the chimes. And she has a concert coming up and we're going to her concert at 94 years old because like, she's like, I'm here, I'm living, and this is another way I can fail, right? Basically, try these things.
Super inspiring.
And then, you know, or there's someone else that's 90 out there or even younger that's like sitting on the couch doing nothing. So it's just a different perspective. Yeah.
I agree completely. You very often, if you just walk through the city or any place, literally, you can see a senior who is barely moving or being on the wheelchair or walking by the cane, and you can see the seniors who are doing I don't know, even Chinese movement or sports or playing billiard or
yoga.
Wow.
Yoga at 94. And she's like, well, it helps my balance, so I'm able to move faster and stuff. And I'm like, 94 and doing yoga. Like, it gives me no excuse to not do yoga today, right? So, like, or get moving. It's amazing. Yeah.
It is. And where do you think it's coming from, that attitude of failing, or is it instilled in her from something else as well? Like, I don't know.
So that grandma is my dad's side, and she definitely grew up on a farm. And so like a hardworking, you know, like educated by all means. And her dad and grandfather were the same way. They were like always striving for better, whether that's failing at crops or whatever, but they are constantly implementers of change and becoming better. And that was true of their whole life, and that was passed on to my grandma. And then just, I mean, I don't think she ever gave up on it because she's still 94 and trying new things. So yeah.
I remember you were saying that in the questionnaire I asked you to fill out on the beginning, you said that what you want to learn is their mistakes and how they impacted the way you you were raised up and how it influenced you. Is there anything specific that you would like to know about it, or any period or any specific person's experience that you know of, but just a little bit that you want to expand on or get deeper in?
I just think of like so many different things that my family as a whole has done over the years, and like it really goes back to like that mindset of like failure's good and like the scientific method. Because like, for example, my mom, before she was married and had kids, was the lead chemist for Pfizer drugs and, you know, was developing drugs. So like it just, like her failures have impacted the world in so many ways, because like they might have failed in a drug that was used for its first primary purpose, but is now being used for a secondary purpose. So it's interesting to me how it all works out, you know what I mean? Like indirectly, but like failure, I don't know, I think that the world thinks failure and like change are bad, and that's not really true. Those are actually good things. So
they are definitely. And I feel like the more we fail, that's what you said, right? The faster we grow as well.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think if is there any part of your heritage in specific nationality wise, because we went through a little bit or we went through your family history, your grandparents, your parents, and is there any part of a nationalities like the German, the Irish, the English that you still want to discover?
There are things and my like lineage is, I feel like, super cool, and there's things that I know and there's things I don't know. So, and this probably isn't surprising, but like my family lineage comes from explorers, which is kind of like go out and find, right? Like scientific for back then. And then like the other thing that I think is super cool is like that my, I think it's my great uncle, my aunt would know the answer to this exactly, was part of the team that like helped to take down like Hitler and his group, and they were like secret spies basically to like do, so like there's lots of like really cool things in my past that in my family like that I don't even know the full extent of, which is like amazing. Or my grandpa, for example, my great grandpa, I guess that would be my great great grandpa, but that worked his way over on a boat, actually witnessed a murder on the boat.
Wow.
So like there's like, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of different things that probably came naturally to my family, like for like trying things and thinking scientifically about certain things. But and I don't know if that comes from my heritage or if it was just something that was like instilled in us. So I don't know.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's a interesting journey, the whole background thing, right? Because you don't know how much, like there are a lot of stories, but then you stop for a second and try to understand how those stories could influence how my grandfather went about his life, or did he, like the one who was playing violin on the boat, was he more suspicious towards other people now, or more careful about things going around him, or did that make him stronger, or like what are those?
So it's like so interesting, and unfortunately some of those stories like we'll never know because like they've passed on. We're reading them through letters or journals or things like that, so we don't know all the details, unfortunately.
That's right. It's one of those things that with generations and people passing away, you lose some of it, right?
Yeah. And
it would be awesome to have that gift of keeping it for future generations as well, right? Because that's the story of our family. It's important, right?
Yeah. And like this is one story that I love. This is from my dad's mom's side, and they were the farmers, and she's the 94-year-old. But like when her grandfather was farming, because of the farm equipment, the buses at that time, school buses, weren't all the uniform color, and so it was hard to see like kids getting on and off the buses. So he went to his local farmers bureau and proposed that they make the buses yellow, so it's a different color, and that they would all be uniform. And so like they implemented that in Buffalo, New York area, and then it obviously transpired through the United States. But like it's so interesting to hear my grandma tell me this story that we recorded it because like I want to be able to pass it down to my grandkids. That's
a legacy.
Yeah,
you think it's a small thing, it's just the color of the bus, but at the end of the day, you have them in Canada as well. They're yellow here too.
Yeah, it's so interesting how like things like that like could easily be lost if you don't keep a record of them, kind of thing. Right. So, yeah.
That's true. It would be really nice to find a way that all families within their own area or own group or between themselves, they like people can record those stories and keep them in like their own library as well, right? Because like if you think about it, the technical aspect is going forward. We are growing as a civilization. We are getting better equipment, better microphones, better cameras, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we are not all camera operators. We are not audio. But at the end, on the other side, we all have a pretty strong computer in our pockets these days.
Oh yeah.
Right? That we could use for it.
Absolutely. My grandfather recently passed, and I think this is one of the coolest things I've seen. There's these little QR codes that you can put on tombstones, and you can scan them with your phone, and it plays like videos of them, or like it tells a little bit of their story. And I'm like, that is so unique, because you could literally be walking through a cemetery and scan someone else's and be like, this person did all these amazing things, and we don't even know who they are.
That's right.
So it's super interesting.
It is a good idea, actually.
Yeah, it's a really cool idea, I think. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's dive a little bit deeper from this perspective of your own family.
Okay.
From your background and your family's background, where you guys are coming from, and tell me, from your own perspective, if you look at the society or your circles of influence or your group of friends, how are you different?
From me growing up, or as an adult, or both?
We can go any direction that you want. Like, what comes to your mind first when you think, oh, I'm different? What's the way you are?
So personally, right, I think one of the coolest gifts that my parents gave me, and this kind of goes back to the way I was raised, I have this really creative mind, and it just comes naturally to me. Like, art has always been something that I loved. My parents have always instilled an atmosphere where I was able to explore that avenue, whether that's like painting watercolors or studying sculpture or clay, whatever that is. But I also, because of my parents, have this very analytical science mind.
Okay.
So for years, and like probably honestly until I was like mid-20s, I battled this identity.
Between two sides?
Yes, because they usually don't coexist.
Yeah, logic and creative is usually completely two different people.
Yes. So like, and people that are creative don't understand people that are logical, and people that are logical don't understand people that are creative. And that's totally okay. But it wasn't until I married those two that I really decided, like, and came into my own, because and marketing is a perfect example of that. Like, you have the creative, you have like your graphics, you have your copy, you have the way you're pitching things, but then you also have the analytics, right? Like, who is seeing it? What is the click rate? What is the open rate? How long is someone spending the time on the email? Where is their eye drawn, right? So when you marry those two, like, then you get this kind of like superpower where you're able to like build the bridge between like someone that like only cares about ROI and then someone who only cares about like the aesthetic. Okay. So but when you build that combination, it's kind of unique and special. And I feel like my parents kind of allowed me to say it's okay to build that versus like you have to be in one or the other.
What was the spark for you to, like you said, there was a moment where you married those two? What was the ignition?
It comes from my mom, 100%. My mom is super creative, also super like analytical science. And to give you an example, she was this fancy chemist, right? And now she teaches high school science programs. And in her school in New York, you have to pass Regents to graduate. And her students are living with disabilities. And so it's harder for them to achieve that goal to graduate high school. So she just has always thought differently. For example, like when she talks about cells, she doesn't talk about them like with a diagram of like your nucleus, your outer layer. She has her students build tacos. Why? Because if they can build a taco, they can remember it for the regions. So like your flour tortilla is now your cell, and your nucleus is like your meat that you're putting in the center. So it's just a different way of thinking. And I feel like when I started to realize, my mom was like, this is okay to do it differently than other people think. And then I was like, it's okay if I do it differently then too. So it was just a unique like aha moment, Oprah Winfrey moment kind of thing, where you're like, okay, like I can be completely different and be successful because I'm completely different.
So was it like you were with your mom and at some point just looking at her how she does things, just open your eyes for yourself?
I feel like that's been like my whole life. But then there was a time when I was at McDonald's and we were trying to, at this one store, which was in a not really a big quote unquote McDonald's area. It was very green and granola and like cloth diapers and not what you would think of McDonald's. But then when you realize that like we're just pitching the wrong story and we're going to do things completely off the book that are not normal, that's when you realize you can get results. So like instead of saying like, we have smoothies at our store, we started pitching, we have vegan smoothies. Because we had vegan smoothies, we were just changing the narrative. And so like changing that and realizing like you can lean in and be completely different and be like creative and using those analytics, like by changing that simple process, the store went from an $800,000 store to like $3 million just by changing a couple things.
That's amazing that you can. There are life situations that you just transfer the knowledge and the experience and the background, literally just looking at your mom, how she did it, into your own life. And that's pretty amazing. And it connects nicely to the role that you have been playing in McDonald's. That was one of your big ones that you... if I remember correctly, you helped them out grow pretty substantially. Yeah. So what was your approach in marketing while being there, besides like communication? Because that was it, right? When you said you changed the narrative, basically you were pitching the same thing, but you were talking about it differently, all right?
Yeah, and so like there's lots of different things like just changing the way you view a restaurant. For example, like a restaurant, typically in Atlanta McDonald's, people think of like hamburgers, right? And French fries and kids meals, right? So for this one store, we changed it. It was in an area where people walked dogs. So on a regular basis. So we would have dog nights and we would have people bring their dogs and we would have these tiny little micro ice cream cones for dogs in the summer, or apples, depending on what they wanted, or French fries, right? And you can bring your dog, you buy a meal, and then we feed your dog like a treat on the patio. So just like, and you're like, that doesn't make sense for McDonald's, but it did for that store. It's not changing any of McDonald's like secret sauces or anything like that. It's just changing the way that we market to that area.
So basically, even though you were working for a big company, huge company, and a lot of people are thinking that McDonald's is selling food and hamburgers. And if you like Chris, it's his favorite movie is about the founder, the Ray Kroc. And I remember the question when I read it somewhere, that there was a person who asked Ray Kroc, or was talking with Ray, and Ray asked him, "What business am I in?" And they said, "Yeah, hamburger business. You are in restaurant business." And he's like, "No, I'm not in the hamburger business. I'm in real estate business." Yep. And if you look at it, that's the unique way of McDonald's as well, because the thing you see when you look at them, they are selling fast food, right? They are all over the world, different places, but at the end of the day, they are not focusing on this is not their main approach is real estate because of what he wanted to achieve.
Yes. So for McDonald's corporate, they own all the land and they lease it to the owner operators. So they are in the real estate business. I mean, they are in the French fry business and all of that too, but they're making a significant amount of money off of real estate.
Yeah. This is super interesting in a way that you fit into the picture as well with your approach and your unique perspective that, like, you kind of resemble the Ray approach.
Kind of, yeah.
Because he was, in one hand he was pitching hamburgers, but in the other, on the back of the whole picture of the clown selling to kids and Happy Meals and all of that, there is that huge machine that is basically looking for the best places, best properties in the whole planet.
Yeah.
To establish the base. And in the same way you were working for the hamburger company, but you were thinking how to do it differently depending on the location that it was in, right?
Yeah. And I think that the key thing out of anywhere you work or anything like that is if you do things the same way, you will always get the same results. So if you want to grow or get better at anything, you have to be willing to try things from a different perspective or a different way. Because like what worked even 15 years ago is not going to work today.
No, that's true.
You have to be willing to grow and you have to be willing to change.
How did you manage to transfer that perspective or that knowledge towards your bosses, supervisors, and like them understanding that wait a second, we need to do something different. We cannot just copy paste the same.
Sure. Yeah. So with like Black Swan, Chris is like totally game with like doing things differently, right? He wants to grow. He realizes that you have to be in uncomfortable situations. Anyone that works out, right, knows that in order to build muscle faster, you have to actually break down and tear the muscle basically to be able to build it faster. So the same thing is true if we took that approach to businesses. Like if you wanted to grow and grow at a fast rate, you might have to completely break down certain parts to be able to tear it down and rebuild it, knowing what you know now at a faster rate. That's
true. That's so true. And so what are you breaking right now to build it up again?
I don't know that I'm necessarily breaking things, but we're testing new ways of marketing. In the same way that like the Black Swan group is constantly growing and striving for better like tactical empathy and better way of teaching people, the same thing is true of the marketing, right? We want to be able to help more people. And so in order to be able to help more people, we need to be able to reach more people.
That's right.
So we have to think of new and different ways of marketing to those people. So
is there anything like that you have your eyes on right now that is something that it seems so ridiculous that you want to try in terms of...
There's lots of things that seem so ridiculous I want to try, right? My biggest thing for this year is it's kind of weird. We're coming back out of COVID, right? And so like we're having more live events and hosting in different cities, and we want to grow to international, right? Because the methodology that they teach isn't something that applies just in the United States or just in North America. It applies to anyone globally. So we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't make those resources available to people all across the world. And the world needs them to like, if you could build a faster relationship by using tactical empathy and have a stronger bond with people, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. That's true.
So that's our goal, like to be a household name across the world with time.
That's amazing. It's Like a lot of people have a misconception about the negotiations, and because there were some charlatans out there who were basically manipulating people, and like there are people who are considering like neuro-linguistical programming and all of those kind of operations that, and people kind of confuse things with negotiations, and negotiations have been around for centuries, just starting with the ancient times and Greece and Rome and all of those. But right now with the unique approach of Black Swan is like you want to build an empathical way of negotiating, right? So thinking about the other side, right?
Yeah. And I am not a coach. So like this is like I have learned from the coaches, but I'm not a coach and I will not be a coach. So I am just their marketer, right? So like I want the world to see, feel, experience Black Swan, and so I'm hoping to provide that door so that coach can walk through that door and change someone's life.
I get you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys are doing an amazing job. So in that respect, what are the goals, or how are you going about setting up goals for yourself, for your team? How have you been doing it through your life when you were planning some things?
So this is going back to my parents again, but my parents really instilled this model of like, you have to have a goal or you will go nowhere.
Okay.
And with that being said, if you set that goal, think backwards on how you can get from the goal to where you are now. And most people think forwards, like, oh, if I do this step, that'll get me closer to my goal. But what if you're missing something? Your journey might be like this if you go that way, but if you go from your goal directly back to where you are right now, you have a more direct path.
So it's like reverse engineering kind of perspective
for your mind. And maybe that's what my parents were doing for our whole thing, right? Like setting us up for failure, setting us for thinking differently, setting goals differently, all of that stuff.
So like thinking about the goal, like do you have like a model that you go about?
Kind of. Yeah. So like I set goals and I set stretch goals. Because it's one thing to have a goal, but I want to go for the stretch goal if I can. So I like, if it's for followers, right? Or like influence or people like spending a certain number of time, I'll start with that range, that in between that goal and that stretch goal. And I'll say like, okay, if I want to make this happen within 3 months, how do I get there? What are the analytical numbers that I need? So I'll divide that by 3, and then I'll divide it by however many days, and I'll figure out, okay, like I need to have this many people reach this many new eyeballs every single day. So what steps do I need to take so it's so manageable that I can reach that?
Okay. And by stretch goal, you mean going to the stars, or is it like stretch goal? Is it a goal but stretched by 20%?
Kind of like that. So like it's like, okay, for example, like in the past we might have had X, we doubled our followers, right? Last year. Okay. So my stretch goal would be like to double our followers again plus 20%.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's like, it's like obtainable, but it's going to be hard to get there.
It's just pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, right? Exactly. And boundaries. Okay.
And then I'm not disappointed if I land at my goal. But if I aim for the stretch goal, I'm more likely to be at my goal and accept that versus like aiming for my goal and settling at 80% or 90%.
Yeah. All right. That's a nice approach. Just making sure it gives you an extra guarantee that you can achieve what you are planning for. And
it's okay if you don't hit your goal. Like people, again, failure, right?
Yeah.
It's okay if you didn't hit your goal if you figured out why, or figured out a different approach, or pivoted, right? That's totally okay. Chris says this, it's not bad to get a client. It's a sin to take long to get the client. Okay. So like that process, right? But and I'm probably butchering all his words, but the idea is like, if it takes you too long to reach that goal, maybe that's not the right goal. Maybe you need to pivot and find a different goal.
Okay.
Going back to like failure is not necessarily a bad thing. It's how you react to failure that's the bad thing.
Okay. All right. So basically the sooner you fail, the better it is.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. I think from that point on, I want to segue to another part, which is kind of important to the whole picture of the podcast, which is the discovery. And it connects to the background. Okay. And you as a person being a curious person and trying the different things all the time, and creative approaches to different just finding different solutions as well, right? If you think about any place that you can go to, where would that be?
For what purpose?
Any purpose whatsoever. Can be a country. Yeah, basically, if you think about like in the world in general, where would you go? What would you like to discover? Or multiple places.
Okay, so I think if I wanted to feel safe and loved, I would either go to my home that I grew up in,
okay,
or my grandparents' lake house. And that's because those are both scenarios where, like, regardless of what I've done or who I am today, I will have people around me to encourage me and say that it's okay. Now, if I wanted to go exploring, I would not probably go there because I've been there a million times. It's comfortable, right? I would say right now, I've never been to Thailand, and I would love to go to Thailand. All
right. Definitely would recommend it. I loved it. It's an amazing place. Asia in general is pretty different world, and just remember. I remember us landing in New Year's in the New Year's first January in Chiang Mai in Thailand, and just seeing the Buddhist celebrations of a new year. It was completely different and eye-opening. 100% recommend that going there.
Yeah, and I want to go to like the India and like the elephant sanctuaries. Okay. All about like which are at both of those. So like, I don't know. I just think culture is so cool. It is
definitely. And I'm all about the discovery. That's why we are here as well, and talking about your background. And that's funny because when you were talking earlier about you merging those two parts of yourself, the analytical and creative, for me the change was when I accepted that I have so many nationalities in my veins, and which I was neglecting for so many years. Sure. And that is what makes me who I am and how I view the world, right? And probably that's why that's also the reason why we cannot sit too long in one place, and we are moving so often. But in the same time, I love discovery and 100% traveling around and seeing other cultures, discover even looking at how other people live their lives and regular mundane everyday activities, and going to the market and going to work, how they are traveling, how is the life and how cities live or countrysides, right? Yeah.
When I was growing up, I was obsessed with learning all the information on Native American Indians and Jewish culture. And I don't know why, but I would read the Stars, the book, like all the time. And then my parents, like going off of that staying curious, right, motto, and I don't know how my mom did this. When I was 10, we took a camper and we went, I think it was like for 2 months-ish across the United States. And like, nice. Just even in the culture of like Navajo Indians, right? Like learning them and going to a rain dance ceremony for them. And like we went to an old working ranch and learned how ranchers lived and doing all these amazing things in the United States. So it was just such a cool experience.
Yeah, I remember us talking a little bit earlier about your mom having the unique approach even for to cuisine and trying different things all the time, just to
absolutely
to try, but also to teach you guys that there are way more things than we see just around ourselves.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, like my mom had this approach that, again, like people aren't afraid of change, they're afraid of things they're not comfortable with. So like if you put yourself in as many uncomfortable situations as you can, like then you will be okay with growing. So like my mom rolling sushi, or like making duck, like things that like were not her natural like heritage or something that had been passed down, but like trying all these different foods and trying to make them in house, and then sometimes failing, and then but learning from it and making it again, and that's okay.
I remember also the story when we were in Nashville together, and we were talking about you figuring out after years that your family is it's kind of well off, and you were grown up in a perspective that you thought that you are kind of poor, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. My parents, my mom they joke, like my uncles joke that she still has her money from kindergarten, her lunch money, because she's so savvy and saves every dollar and cent, right? That like we just always thought that. But we didn't know. Like my grandparents were really smart and invested in some really amazing companies before they were big, right? But we just always thought we were just like broke people, because like they saved everything and penny pinched and like really spent the money where they found value, and like investing in us to be able to go out west, or other things. Oh yeah.
So is it really penny pinching, or is it just being frugal and conscious where you spend the money? Because
maybe a little.
Okay, all right. Because at the end of the day, you have been traveling, right, around the whole U.S. and being different places, traveling for 2 months as a family. That's a big one. And U.S. is huge. It's not like traveling through Europe, right?
No.
It would be.
I have no clue how my mom did without Pinterest, because we went and saw like, the Corn Palace, and I was like, I don't know how she planned all this stuff. I really don't. So
magazines?
I have no clue, other than like, I don't know if you even know what this is, right? But they used to have with AAA, the travel agency, they would have like these maps, and you would travel this path on this map, and then you would flip the page and your next map would be there. So like she planned this all out, and I'm like, it's amazing to me to think about it before the land of Google, because we can like get on the computer and I could like type in like, I want to see these 12 things, or open an app that says like Roadside America, and you can find all these great places to go. But that didn't exist at that point in time. So
no, it didn't, right?
I have no clue. Like it's amazing to think about.
Yeah, all those foldable maps and all, completely different world than what we have right now, right?
Totally different.
Yeah. So going from the discovery and going from next point on map for you being Thailand, and thinking about the circle of influence and your friends and people who are around you, do you feel like you have like your own tribe of people?
Yeah, totally. I don't think like life, in my opinion, and this is my undoctorate, like not psychology opinion, is life was made for connection. And I actually have this like firm belief that if people were more connected, people would be less depressed. I don't know if that's true, but my thought is, if people are connected, they have a person to talk to. They have someone to do things with. They have all these amazing opportunities just through connection. And the other thing that I think is completely insane is that people feel like you have to agree with someone on every single thing to be like your best friend or connected. And that's just not realistic.
No, it's not.
And it's not healthy. And like, again, that goes from the mindset, like in my mind, I don't want all my friends to think like me, because like I'm not going to be able to grow if everyone thinks like me.
You will not be able to fail in your thought process, right? If nobody gonna undermine it or say, no, this is not how it works.
Exactly. So like I want to be surrounded by people that I think are smarter than me and have totally different worldviews than me, because that's how I'm going to grow. I want to be the dumbest person in the room, and I want to feel connected to you, and so you inspire me to be a better person.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So on that note, like, what would you do to help others feel more like they belong or they are more connected?
I think that goes back to like why I work with the amazing company that I work with, right? Tactical empathy is not about agreeing with someone. It is making someone feel heard. And if someone feels heard, they feel connected. So the biggest thing that I think that anyone could take away, and this is learning directly from the amazing people that I work with, right? Being the dumbest person in the room, is
definitely the most modest in that room. You are.
I don't know about that, but is to be silent, right? Like and it's so hard. It is like a skill that does not come naturally to me, because I want to fix things. I want to problem solve. I want to work with you on this. But if I am silent, it gives you space to talk and space for you to connect with me.
That's right.
And space for me to understand you better, so I can support you and learn from you and grow with you.
Totally agree. It's a hard journey, just being empathical. And I remember coming back, it was a wow aha moment for me as well in Nashville I think it was during the second day where we were talking, and suddenly I realized that it is not only about the negotiations and it's not only about the business. It was so relatable to the life per se, and for me personally, it was really relatable for my relationship with Kat, and how we struggle on the way with communication.
Yeah.
Because I'm not the best at it. It takes me way longer to change and to understand things. I need to spend more time in understanding things, and it was such a eye opener for me that those skills apply to so many areas in life. And at the end of the day, I wasn't there alone who thought like that. There were a couple guys who stood up and like, how do I ask her? And suddenly transferring from business perspective and us talking about business negotiations and applying this to our professional lifetime, suddenly we went into applying it to our personal relationships.
Totally. Yeah. I think that the skills and the techniques that Black Swan offers people are so transparent. From yes, they will help you to grow your company and close deals and all of that, but they will also help you to communicate with your kids and have a healthy relationship with your spouse and just be a better human being.
True. I totally agree, and you are the best example, and your daughter negotiating with the best negotiators in the world. It's like that's a different level, 100%. I can stretch it in or say enough about it, and her learning from her young age like that, she gonna be really,
she's pretty cool.
Yeah, she's pretty cool, but she gonna be going pretty far.
Hopefully I'm gonna have her fail so many times that she's pushed ahead.
True. I remember us even talking about the credit cards. You were teaching her how to go about her finances. Being 7-year-old now?
Yep, 7-year-old and has her own credit card because she needs to know how to use money. And I don't have any cash with me today, and I'm in a foreign country, right? Technically, so but I have a credit card.
Yep.
So she's got to learn how to use it.
That's right.
And be responsible for it. Yeah. Even at 7.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I know a lot of financial knowledge I have been learning by myself, and I always been curious in that perspective and that areas. I remember reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and thinking about my own family, and it was thunderstruck. I was thunderstruck by it, and seeing the resemblance and all the situations and how what way the society has on us and the social impact on our own communities, which are families, that can really push us in wrong directions. And thinking about our house as the biggest asset, which is biggest bullshit there is, actually, because until it's not paying you are paying for it. It's a liability, not an asset.
Sure.
Right. So on that note, because you have a huge family background of investing, let's say, what is the vertical that you use, or the creative financial way that you learn, that you want to, right now, looking at the perspective, you would like to have it learn it earlier? What would that be?
So I feel like you have to invest smart. Absolutely. But you also have to take risk, right? Because without risk, there's no reward. And going back to failure, right? So for example, I remember seeing my dad fail miserably at this. And he bought a soccer team. Okay?
Wow.
Yeah. A small semi-pro soccer team that later went under. But he was willing to take the risk. And it's okay. It was okay to fail. It was worth the risk. It might have paid off exponentially. Yep. You might have broken even. Might have lost money. But if you didn't take the risk and try it,
that's right,
you didn't have the odds of anything. So now, I do not mean go out and blow millions in the lottery. Right? That's not a good investment. Or go buy a bunch of cars or Pokemon cards or random things. But if you are, my dad basically took a risk and invested in himself, and it didn't work out, and that's okay. One of the first things I did right after college, because I had this crazy upbringing, right, was when I was 20, I opened my own store, and it failed. It totally failed. It made it 4 years. It survived for 4 years. It did a lot of good, but at the end of the day, you close it, you walk away, and you learn, and then you go and do something else, and that's totally okay too. So as far as investing, I think you need to invest smart, but also be a little bit of a risk taker, because one of those risks one day are going to pay off.
That's right.
So
I think looking at the life on the perspective of risk taking and going outside of your comfort zone, coming back to the failure and going after and testing yourself out again and again gives you that edge, I guess, because you fail, you open a business, it fails, but the difference between the failure and the success is if you're going to try again.
Yeah. And it's not exactly, it's not bad to fail. It's bad to fail and do nothing with it.
Yeah.
Or it's bad to fail and be sorrowful for it and not start again. That's what's the killer. My dad failed, okay, so then he took that money and he reinvested in something else, and then he won. Do you mean that's okay? It's okay to be in that boat. Life isn't, I heard this recently and I was like, this is so true, right? Life isn't flatlining. If you're flatlining, you're dead. But when life is up and down, you're living.
Yep.
So like that's okay.
That's true. I would say from our own perspective as well, the investment that we took, or the risk that which is repeatable risk on our side, was leaving our own country and going to the one and then to the second, and in Kat's case the third one, and us traveling, trying selling different products while we were traveling to different companies. Didn't know the language, didn't know the skills, didn't know the culture, but still tried, right? Yeah. And succeeded to some degree, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
It's always just trying one more time and one more time,
absolutely,
and one more time, right? That getting up again on your feet and
using what you've learned to make better choices for the next time, or That's better true. Tests for the next time.
That's true. 100% agree. Let's sum it up with couple questions that might be hard,
okay,
but might be interesting. What question would you like to be asked more often?
Man, that is hard. I don't know. I know what question I would like to ask more often.
What is that?
How can I help? I think that is probably one of the most underused questions. And I ask that, I don't even know if my team knows this. I ask that after every time I close out a meeting. Okay, how can I help? Because if I put myself in that scenario, and it's about staying curious, there might be something so simple that they're not able to do, but I can help them do that. That sets us all further ahead.
Try being selfish for a second.
Oh man. Okay.
What would that be like?
What
would you like people that are close to you, that are not that close, to ask you? I know that you are empathetic and you want to give a heart out to other people, but like if you could get something in that term, like
I think people should check in on their friends more often. And I don't think you should ask, how are you doing? I think that should be the question you never say. I think you should ask things completely differently, so it makes people stop and think. So, for example, like I would say to my friend, what color is your heart today? And they would be like,
that's nice.
Weird question. But I can usually gauge, like, based upon how their response is. Like if they say my heart is blue. Okay, is it blue because you're like feeling freedom and you're like imagining the ocean and the sky, or is it blue because you're seeing it as sorrow? So I think that just in general, people should check in on more. So maybe people should check on me more. I don't know.
All right. Okay. All right. And let's go into diving even further. What have been the greatest day of your life?
Oh, that's easy. I can tell you that.
Okay.
Mina. So Mina's my daughter, and by far, like when you become a parent, they say your life changes, and it does, because you are responsible for a human, but like that human you are also like inspired by, and like you know all your faults, and for me at least as a parent, I'm like, how can I make her way better than me, or how can I set her up for super success? So, and it's like this unreal moment of like a baby who knows nothing, right, at that time, but you would like die for this child and like love this child exponentially.
Okay. We went through your background, we went through your professional career and some personal stories and where you want to travel. From a perspective of creative guru or marketing director, what would be the one advice for people seeking in that direction of marketing? What would be something that you can advise people on, or how to look at marketing, having in mind current market or what's coming?
I would say the biggest takeaway that I've learned from some very smart people is get comfortable being uncomfortable. So one of the best advice I can give someone is, if you are sitting somewhere and you are too comfortable at that table, get up and leave the table. You're not doing yourselves any favors by sitting there. Put yourself in a scenario where you're learning something new, in an intense conversation or somewhere that feels foreign, and then learn at that table.
So again, we are coming back to exiting your comfort zone and going towards failure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a takeaway from today's podcast.
Maybe.
Going outside of your comfort zone and learning through that approach of your parents to pushing you guys towards failure. Tell me, what did you fail? How did you fail today, right?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
That's pretty amazing perspective to see, because it's humbling as well, right?
Yeah. Very humbling.
Laurel,
Yes.
thank you so much for coming. Thank you for taking the time. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I think we're gonna meet here again.
Oh, okay. Well, Matt, it's always a pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you, Laurel.
Thank you.
Awesome. And it's a wrap. We dare you. If you are bold enough, hit subscribe, repost the rebellion, and don't miss out on next week's episode. It's going to be bloody brilliant. See you on the next one.